Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1198, July the 22nd, 2020, Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to pick up where I left off with yesterday. Of course, yesterday we learned from the Gateway Pundit story, or they wrote the story, saying that Igor Danchinko, or some people call him Igor Danchinko, was the primary source for Christopher Steele. Do you believe that? I don't. When we get to the end of this video, you'll understand why. This morning, the Gateway Pundit's link was removed from Google. You couldn't access their website till later in the afternoon when they called Google to make a complaint. Some new information has come out today. We'll get to that as well. Let me pick up where I left off yesterday. This is going to require me going through some of these bullet point facts and timelines and dates. And hopefully by the time I get to the end of the video, I'll be able to summarize it. If not, then the summary will come tomorrow. But we must get these facts out and establish these for you to understand where I'm coming from. It's the same place I've been coming from for over 2 years. When I told you that the Rotten Reverend planned, organized, directed, and controlled this operation. It's a Hillary Clinton operation. Let's go ahead and get to the bullet point timelines and events. We're told that Igor Danchinko was tasked by Christopher Steele to look into Manafort and his dealings with Ukraine and his corruption. So in April of 2016, Danchinko goes to Ukraine. Who else was over in Ukraine in April of 2016 looking into Paul Manafort? That would be Chalupa, Alexandria Chalupa. Working for who? The Rotten Reverend and the DNC. Do you think Mr. Danchinko was actually in Ukraine in 2016 digging up dirt on Manafort? We know Chalupa was. And now we're being told it was Danchinko. You know what the problem with that is? Is that Confusion GPS wasn't even hired and brought in until late April of 2016. Christopher Steele, so far as we've been told, up to this point, was not even brought in until June of 2016. So how did Danchinko figure into being in Ukraine looking into Manafort in April of 2016? Danchinko's looking into Manafort in Ukraine before Fusion GPS is even hired, and at least a month before Christopher Steele is even hired. Why was Danchinko in Ukraine in 2016 looking into Manafort? And if so, who was he working for? Couldn't have been working for Steele. He wasn't even working for Confusion GPS at that time, according to what we've been told. Can you explain that? Of course, we learned also yesterday that Danchinko was a close friend and associate of Fiona Hill. Fiona Hill. Fiona Hill was also very close to another individual, Clinton's close ally and friend for many years, Strobe Talbott. Strobe Talbott. Remember that name, because you're going to be hearing about it a lot. We also know that in the summer of 2016, Strobe Talbott called Christopher Steele and asked him for a copy of the dossier. Strobe Talbott's calling and asking for a copy of the dossier directly from Steele. Who told Talbot that Steele was making a dossier in the summer of 2016? Head of the CIA says he didn't even learn about it until December. Clapper says about the same. They didn't receive the first memo even until July the 20th. The FBI. But yet Strobe Talbott, the Clintons' close friend, is calling Steele, supposedly in the summer of 2016, to get Steele to send him a copy of what he's working on. Can you explain that? Strobe Talbott, we talked yesterday about the Brookings Institution. Did you know that he was the president of the Brookings Institution? Where both Danchinko and Fiona Hill worked, along with Susan Rice and many others. Did you know that? Strobe Talbott was the president of Brookings Institution at the time. We also know that the Right Reverend Clinton appointed Talbot to chair the Foreign Affairs Advisory Board when she was the Secretary of State. So Talbot wasn't just president of the Brookings Institution at that time and calling up Christopher Steele in the summer of 2016, asking him for some of the information he was putting together. How he learned about it, I don't know. No one else knew about it that early. But at the same time, the Right Reverend Clinton puts Talbot on the Foreign Affairs Advisory Board while she was Secretary of State. And of course, I said it was Talbot who asked Steele for a copy of the dossier, which of course, at that time in the summer of 2016, we're talking, Steele didn't even write the first memo until July the 20th. He didn't brief the FBI the first time until July the 5th in Rome. Talbot seems to be way ahead of the game, doesn't he? He seems to be ahead of Confusion GPS and Christopher Steele. So in the summer of 2016, he's asking for that, and he finally gets what he's asking for in November of 2016, when Steele sends him a copy of the dossier in its present form, which would have still been missing the final memo, which didn't come out until much later. December. I think the last memo was written in December. And there was another one written in October. Two in October and one in December. So Talbot would have got a copy that was missing three of the last memos. But I don't think it matters in this case, and you're going to find out why later. And what did Talbot do with the copy he got from Steele in November of 2016? What did Talbot do with the copy of the dossier in its present form at that time, November 2016? What did Talbot do with that copy he got? He gave it to Fiona Hill. Gave it to her the day before BuzzFeed released it, published it. That would have been in January of 2017. Talbot gets a copy of the dossier, not the final draft, but the one still with 3 memos left to go, November of 2016, and he gives it to Fiona Hill a few weeks later, the day before it's published by BuzzFeed. Strobe Talbott's really in the know, isn't he? Long-time close personal friend of the Clintons, very close friend, obviously, of Fiona Hill, and she's a very close friend of Mr. Danchinko and Mr. Sharamella. And we also know that Talbot's brother, Strobe Talbot's brother, his brother-in-law, is Right Reverend Clinton's henchman, Cody Shearer. Who wrote his own dossier that told the exact same lie about Trump paying hookers to pee on a bed in a Moscow hotel, the Ritz-Carlton. How did Cody Shearer get the exact same story as Danchinko? Especially when Danchinko says his source is a woman who lives in Russia. And it's a fake story. How did Cody Shearer get the same fake story? Did he know Danchinko's drinking buddy? Female Russian drinking buddy? If not, then where did he get the information? Can you answer that question? Let's talk about Glenn Simpson and Christopher Steele. Remember, Glenn Simpson's wife said he's the one that authored the dossier. Steele was working for him. He hired Christopher Steele. That's what Glenn Simpson's wife said. Mary Jacoby, very close friend to Hillary Clinton, worked for her at the Little Rock, Arkansas law firm, where she's from. Simpson and Steele began their professional partnership in January of 2011. Steele and Simpson began their professional partnership in January of 2011, just after Fusion GPS was founded by Simpson and Frisch. In September of 2015, Steele, Bruce Orr, and 2 FBI officials met at the UN Assembly, where the FBI and Bruce Orr convinced Steele to take on Oleg Deripaska as a source. He was already a source for the FBI at that time, and Deripaska was formally introduced to Steele at this meeting by Bruce Orr and 2 FBI officials in September 2015 at the UN Assembly. Bruce Orr visited Steele 2 times in London in February of 2016. Remember, he was supposed to have been cut off as a source. So they started using Bruce Orr. And Bruce Orr traveled to London in February of 2016 and met with Steele twice. Why would that be? I mean, the dossier had just been published. Steele had been outed. Why would Orr need to meet with Steele some more? Trump won the election. The dossier was out there. It was a fraud. And everybody knew it. Yet we still have Bruce Orr needing to visit Steele in London 2 times in the month of February. Then, in June of 2016, Simpson met Steele in London at Heathrow International Airport, where he offered Steele the job of investigating the Trump-Russia connection. And Steele accepted. Remember that date. It's very important. June of 2016 is when Glenn Simpson offers Steele the job, when they met at Heathrow International Airport, which, by the way, is where Steele liked to meet people, at Heathrow Airport. That was his meeting place. Remember, June of 2016. But somehow, Mr. Danchinko is investigating Manafort for corruption in April of 2016. He speaks Ukrainian, by the way. Guess who probably doesn't? Christopher Steele. And the Rotten Reverend. And Cody Shearer. And Blumenthal. And Nellie. And Glenn Simpson. Steele provides his first memo to Glenn Simpson on June the 24th of 2016, and then he provides it to the FBI agent Mike Gaeta on July the 20th of 2016 in Rome. Gives it to Simpson a month before he gives it to the FBI. June of 2016, June 26th of 2016, Steele provides a second memo to the FBI. July 26, 2016, provides a second memo to the FBI. The first one on the 20th and the second one on the 26th. And it was that second memo where Steele makes the claim that Russia was responsible for the hack of the DNC. And what did his subsource, if you believe that, his primary subsource, say in the transcript in his interview? He doesn't know where Steele got that. Doesn't know where he got it. Must have just made it up. In Steele's second meeting with the FBI in Rome, Gaeta asked Steele to explain how he compiled his reports and wanted background on his sources. In Steele's second meeting with the FBI in Rome, Gaeta asked Steele to explain how he compiled his reports and wanted background on his sources. This is early summer 2016. Now here's a little bombshell for you. Luke Harding of The Guardian, who was probably in closer contact with Christopher Steele than anybody throughout this whole thing. He stayed in constant contact with Christopher Steele and wrote quite a few good stories. In fact, it was a story he wrote that got me doing TowerGate videos. Trump comes out and says, I think they're spying on me. 3 days later, Luke Harding writes an article in The Guardian saying, yeah, it's GCHQ. They're spying on you for the CIA. Luke Harding was probably the most closely trusted source that Steele had as a journalist, as far as people we talked to. Never forget that. And at about the same time that Steele was supposedly getting all this information in July of 2016, guess what happens very early in August of 2016? According to Luke Harding of The Guardian, who kept in regular contact with Christopher Steele. You ready for this one? Guardian. Steele's sources stopped speaking to him in early August of 2016. Steele's sources stopped talking to him in early August of 2016. That's Luke Harding from The Guardian, who spoke to Christopher Steele all the time. More than anyone. If Christopher Steele's sources stopped speaking to him in early August of 2016, then how did he get all that information for the additional majority of the memos? The only memos we had up to that time were like the first 4. There were 22, right? 22 or 26. However you count the last 4. The majority of the memos of the dossier had not been written yet. Yet The Guardian, Luke Harding, Steele's closest source, media friend, is writing in The Guardian that Steele's sources stopped speaking to him in early August of 2016. So if his sources stopped talking to him in early August 16, how does he go on to complete the other 3/4 of the dossier? Can you explain that? On September 21st, 2016, Steele meets with Jonathan Weiner in the District of Criminals. Weiner gives Steele the Shearer dossier, which he got from the Rotten Reverend Clinton's henchman, Sidney Blumenthal. October 1st, 2016, Steele meets again with the FBI in Rome, and the FBI tells Steele that they are looking at Papadopoulos. Steele gives the FBI Cody Shearer's dossier. That's right, the FBI. That's against the law. That's breaking federal law. The FBI is not supposed to be telling a so-called informant working for them about another ongoing investigation that Steele wasn't even aware of. In that meeting, October 1st, 2016, the FBI says, hey, we're investigating this guy Papaglopoulos. Do you know him? Not supposed to do that. Never does this so-called subsource, never in his transcript does he ever talk about Papaglopoulos, nor is he asked. Mr. Danchinko doesn't know anything about him. He didn't volunteer it, and he's never asked. He's never asked a lot of things. Mid-October 2016, Christopher Steele goes back to the United States and visits the U.S. State Department. This is mid-October. This is just 3 weeks before the election. He goes back, visits the U.S. State Department, meets with Kathleen Kvalik. Get this. Then after meeting with Kvalik, he goes over to the FBI, where he is debriefed for 4 consecutive days. Steele was debriefed by the FBI for 4 consecutive days. And at that time, mid-October 2016, Steele reveals the names of his sources. October 2016, mid-October 2016, Steele meets with the FBI for 4 days and reveals the names of his sources. If that's true, then why did Mr. Alton and Mr. Soma and the 2 people from the DOJ NSD need to meet with the so-called subsource 2 times in January 2017, 4 months later, to find out who his sources were? Apparently, Steele told him in the middle of October. Can you explain that? October 28th, Simpson tells Christopher Steele to contact David Corn. This is literally 9 days before the election. Simpson tells Christopher Steele to contact David Corn of Mother Jones. 2 days later, Corn writes the article, quote, "A veteran spy has given the FBI information alleging a Russian operation to cultivate Donald Trump." Boom. That was Hillary's October surprise. But it fell flat, didn't it? No one even cared. And what happened the very next day after Corn writes that article? A veteran spy has given the FBI information alleging a Russian operation to cultivate Donald Trump. The FBI fires Steele. No need for him anymore. No need for him anymore. For now. But once Trump wins the election, they need him again. So Steele starts feeding Bruce Orr, with Glenn Simpson acting as the middleman. November 28th through the 30th of 2016, Steele meets with David Kramer, McCain's boy, to fill him in on the dossier material. On December 13th, Steele sends his final memo to Simpson. The final Steele memo of the dossier sent to Simpson on December the 13th. Simpson then sends the complete dossier to David Kramer, who then gives it to McCain, who then gives it to Comey. Comey reads it and says, wow, this is new. Peter's been stroking us, talking to Lisa Page and the emails that we've already read. Wow, this looks like a different one than we've seen. Yeah, it's the latest one with the new shit that you didn't get from Steele because you fired him. So he gave it to Bruce Orr. September of 2017, Steele meets with the Mueller team. Now we're into 2017 now. September 2017, Steele meets with the Mueller team. Then they had a follow-up conference call on October the 28th of 2017. So what are we learning here? Just exactly what I've been telling you for a very long time. That the flow of information wasn't coming from Steele to anyone. It was the other way around. HRC's, the Right Reverend Clinton's cronies were Steele's sources. And his primary source? Strobe Talbott. And the FBI and the CIA knew it. Talbot's good friends with all those people, especially the CIA people. Maybe that's how we can explain how people like Halper and Downer were busy boys back in the spring of 2016, long before Steele was around, or the so-called subsource. The dossier is a scam. I don't mean that the information in the dossier is a scam. We know that. We've known that for a long time. I mean the damn dossier is a scam. It's a shiny object to distract us. Glenn Simpson, was running the show, not Christopher Steele. His wife told us that. Doing it all for the rotten reverend. She was paying him a lot of money. They had a mutual interest, as did Christopher Steele. But I'll tell you this right now, Christopher Steele is a liar. Straight up liar. His entire story is a lie. I don't believe that Mr. Danchinko was his primary subsource at all. And I don't believe those subsources of his were the source of anything. I believe that entire thing is a fake, a fraud, a hoax. Just another smaller plot, part of the much larger plot. That's what it was. We had some breaking news today from Chuck Ross at the Daily Caller. New transcripts have just been released from the original deposition that Christopher Steele gave in the Gubarev case. Remember that? Mr. Gubarev, owner of Webzilla, who Steele alleged in his so-called dossier that was a part of the hacking operation, filed the lawsuit against Steele. Steele had to give a deposition. Transcripts of that deposition were released recently, and Chuck Ross has been reading them. You're going to like this from Chuck Ross. From the transcripts. Right after Trump won the election in November of 2016, Christopher Steele contacted Strobe Talbott and asked him how he wanted him to handle the package, meaning the dossier. Trump wins the election. Who does Christopher Steele call? Talbot. Hey, Steele, we lost. So what do you want me to do with this dossier? Why is Christopher Steele calling Strobe Talbott right after Trump wins the election and asking the Rotten Reverend's very close friend, a dude connected to everything intelligence-wise, why is Steele calling Talbot to ask Talbot what he should do with the dossier? Who is Christopher Steele working for? Fusion GPS, who is working for Perkins Coie, who is working for the Rotten Reverend. Those FBI agents that interviewed the so-called subsource Mr. Danchinko. There's a lot of problems with that. I've read the damn thing now 3 times. That shit ain't legit. That was not an FBI interview, my friends. Why did they do it? We just learned that Steele told him who his sources were back in October. They didn't need to have that conversation, did they? So why did they have that conversation? And why Mr. Danchinko? When you read the transcript, you get the appearance that Mr. Danchinko was not the least bit interested in any of it. Didn't even put any effort into it. Called some of his drinking buddies he knows from Russia. And they supposedly produced all this information. Including Milian, allegedly. Denies it all. Got all that information in one meeting. Or is it 2? Because Mr. Danchinko, on day 1 of interview, says I talked to him once. On day 2, he says he talked to him twice. Mr. Danchinko's not telling the truth. I don't think he's telling the truth about a lot of things. I don't think he's got any sources. I don't think he was a subsource, and I don't think he's got any sources. That was a cover your ass session is what that was. Once everything had been blown up, they had to find a way. In January 2017, they're freaking out. Trump's won. You got maybe Flynn coming in to be the national security advisor. The shit's going to hit the fan. It's all falling apart. They're going to find out everything. It's time to cover your ass. So now they got to go back. Retrace their steps. They got to find a fucking subsource, man. They better. And he better have some sources. And they better be people that you'll never be able to get to or talk to. When Christopher Steele was asked in October of 2016 who his sources were, who do you think he told him his sources were? Do you think he said Strobe Talbott? Clint Simpson? With the woman he's got working for him over there doing open source research, Nellie Orr? A couple guys who are friends of Hillary from that law firm? Shearer and Blumenthal? Probably Podesta? I'm sure Slick Willie was using his contacts with his good friend, who he's known for many, many years, went to college with him at Oxford, Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. Still don't know who brought Halper in, but he's connected to Hackloot. Still don't know who brought Misfit in, but Misfit knew Hillary. And I'm sure that Misfit knew Halper. And we know Halper and Downer are very good friends. Spoke together twice in Cambridge in 2016. I don't have this all figured out. Not yet. But I got a lot of things figured out. And this whole dossier, this so-called meeting with the so-called subsource, total bullshit. God wasn't a subsource. And he didn't have any sources. And there were no Russians. This was an inside job. Planned, organized, directed, and controlled by the Rotten Reverend with her inside goons. They came up with this scam. They hired Confusion GPS to spread the bullshit. Fusion GPS went out to spread the bullshit. And the media said, I'm sorry, we need to have something. Those were the pre-dossiers. The proto-dossiers. Simpson had to go back to Sussman and Hillary's lawyer and say, I'm sorry, man, we got a problem. The media won't run the shit because it's bullshit. So what are we going to do? Simpson said, well, you know, I think we need a better salesman. Somebody with some credibility. I know this guy named Christopher Steele. He could sell it. I think that's what happened. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. Take care.